Alright, hello and welcome. Today I'll be talking about how I use Abrams. Abrams is a tank sustain junkie who is legit a trifecta of everything, and keep in mind that things are subject to change drastically since this game is in alpha. Now to get started, I use the Punchy McPuncherson build. This build I used for the longest and covers literally everything and anything you can and will need to be the best Abrams, especially if you get fed and or are just cracked with Abrams. And so now that we're running out this build, let's start with how I flow off with my games. I played a lot of games with Abrams and I have a rough estimate of who and how you will struggle with certain heroes because of the way they work. Now obviously it's going to be different for everyone considering who is using said hero and how they use it. So to simplify everything, let's pretend that they're extremely experienced with said hero. I will also explain how and why each individual hero is or isn't a problem for Abrams and how they would interact through the game's early to late game. And before we get into that, I will be going over how I use Abrams with the build that I use and other details along the way. So as a starting scenario, let's say you're a solo queue, so you get solo lane. If you have a more neutral lane or even active lane with poking or small fighting, I would usually speedrun my wave without letting the enemy see me, so I always hide behind any cover. Reasons I do this is to both limit their ideas and give them a sense of fear. Thanks to both his ram and lifesteal radius, he is very difficult to face early, and combine that with his shotgun pistol, you wouldn't want that in your face at all. If the enemy hardly sees you, they will have to worry about finishing their lane faster or worry about a potential all-out attack or an early kill. And since it's neutral or just with poking or limited fighting, like I said, with not much action or with a little bit of action, I unlock ram first since I won't have to worry about sustain yet. And even then, starting slots will be all about sustain since things like restorative shot and melee lifesteal with their regen passive will make it really hard for you to get hurt at all. At most, it will tickle when they use their best ability or when they all out you, since you scale pretty fucking hard throughout the whole entirety of the game. And back to speedrunning the lane, you would also want to deny as much as you can, pressure both the player and force them to shoot their minions by standing on the friendly minion, or legit just make them petty and miss the minion to not further give you gain at all. And if you are really confident when you get first entire slots of early lane, then clear lane and get their camp with them knowing, and hold a corner for when he pushes and just ram him and kill him. Which leads to another question: well, how the hell will I do that without getting parried, since most of the time you will be meleeing? And to get started with that, there are two types of melees. There is a charged melee and a light melee. You only ever want to charge when you're far and or know you can land it without the risk of getting parried. Light melee is something that should be abused in their face regardless of the parry mechanic because it can work most of the time. You simply just have to play mind games with them. So there's two scenarios for that. Scenario 1 of 2. First one involves engaging with ram stun or alt stun. If you heavy melee with distance or even up close, you will get parried because of the previous nerf that cucked me bad since they nerfed the duration of the stun. So to make that form of engagement work, light melee. Do not melee twice. Shoot your gun a random amount of times, doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2, just make sure you randomize it. If you do it right, they will parry out of fear or legit just stare at you until they die since you're constantly shooting them. If they have sustain, however, then just punch them at a very inconsistent time after shooting a couple of rounds till they just get baited, or they just again stare at you, they don't do anything until they die, or just start running for that matter. But randomize it every time and it will be very unpredictable. But once they fuck up their parry, then legit just go ham on them with heavy melees. I think it's like 3 or 4 heavy melees for free before they get their next parry. So yeah, they should just be dead by then. Second scenario will be where you charge every melee attack. If you aren't confident with light melees and you want to keep it simple, simply avoid hitting predictable parries. So if you redirect your punch and simply flick away when you're about to reach their parry, you will bait them out of it. And if you're ballsy, just directly hit them with heavy melees and test the waters to see if they're really consistent on parrying, if they even know how to parry to begin with. But aside from that, yeah, it's simple. Just flick away your heavies so you don't get parried. It's pretty simple. Just it's not rocket science. So I think that's everything for early game. So now mid to late game. This is gonna apply to every main scenario that I will be mentioning since Abrams scales very well and is strong from beginning to end most of the time. So to make it quick, mid game you'd want to farm and gank. If your first guardian's still up, maintain it for as long as you can and farm and gank at the same time as much as you can. Just try and balance all 3 of them. But if you don't have guardian, then just farm and gank. Play with their team most of the time. Late game, you want to be chilling with your team. Preferably, you'd want to be the one starting the fights since you have a lot of sustain. You can get out of a lot of fights with a lot of damage taken. Obviously, take fights that you know you can win. Since it's a MOBA, you can kind of decide whether or not this guy is going to be stronger than you or not, or if it's a close one, or if it's not going to be close and you can get absolutely destroyed. And keep in mind, as a group, since you are pretty hard to kill when, you know, you're with a group, or if you have the right skill, because even I have a problem with overextending by myself in a lane and dying to 3 or 4 people jumping me because I overstayed my welcome. So just understand that just because you have a lot of power, a lot of health, a lot of sustain, does not make you somewhat a 1v6er at all times, unless you're like extremely fed, which even then you wouldn't be completely invincible. Just remember, it's team-based, not Abrams-based. But yeah, that's how I find it to be for me when it comes to mid to late game. I don't really need much brain power since I am Abrams anyway, so yeah. And now for the second lane scenario, let's say you are struggling in lane. You pretty much do the same thing, do not get seen as often, and try to play it safe. If the pressure is too much, there isn't much counterplay to you other than to get harassed in lane or early ganked. Just make sure you can get your wave and balance that with staying alive. And that's the thing too, you'd want to worry about staying alive, not because you're going to feed them, but because you're going to lose minion waves, which offer you more souls early game than actually dying. But yeah, play under tower to minimize getting hit. If you take too much damage, distance a bit behind the tower and less hit your minions and steal some from your enemies, since they're going to be pushed up in your tower from the constant pressure, and at some point they will want to go and buy, so just hold out as much as possible. You can buy healing right and follow the same first couple of sustain slots and you will be fine, since once you have both your 1 and 2 you can handle yourself pretty well. And that's if it isn't certain heroes, which now would probably be the perfect time to talk about how to play against any hero in the game. Now obviously you can't go Abrams versus Abrams, so I will tell you how to also play against Abrams in case anyone has had a really bad experience with Abrams players, because I even have when I play like Haze or Infernus. It can be a little bit, you know, horrendous when you play against a really good Abrams. Alright, to start playing against an Abrams, you want to keep your distance without bringing up any hero specifics. If you have mobility, you can harass him and escape in case he gets close. Just make sure that you realize if he has RAM and duration extender, his RAM will last a couple more seconds, so just be very aware of that. Make sure you can see what they buy at some point to kind of know what the hell you're dealing with, because again, duration extender can fuck you up pretty badly if you learned the RAM extension and then he just buys duration extender and now all of a sudden it lasts like 3 more seconds and you get put against up a wall and you just die off of that. And make sure you position yourself where he can't constantly steal your souls. Usually people start on one side of the lane since the minions tend to spread throughout the whole lane, so go on the side that he isn't on and then rotate from there and try and keep an eye out on him at the same time. And please, for the love of God, learn how to parry. Please, bro. Like, a lot of you guys need to drill this into your head. No matter what, you just gotta learn it. Whatever your parry key is, just make sure you know it exists. I've had matches where it legit just feels weird to have these kills for free because people allow me to melee charge them from very long distances, like pretty much as far as the Milky Way at this point. Like, I could get punished hard, but they just don't parry me, so I abuse that till they randomly gain consciousness and have a brain all of a sudden and parry me after I made them go like 0-7 throughout the duration of the match. Like, bruh. The only counter to Abrams that plays melee mind games is to just not let them get close at all. People tend to not like spending slots when it comes to countering one player, but the harsh reality is you kind of have to, and adjust to that every game you play, since everyone got their own counters. Legit, everyone got their own counters. Pocket, for example, he has 15% minus spirit resistance, so he is weaker when it comes to spirit damage or using abilities. Think could be as, you know, abilities is connected to spirit damage, and his freaking gun is strong as shit. So let's say you're in a dual lane against an Abrams in a Pocket. You can build Hellbane, since it not only limits Abrams' health, but it will also help you with your spirit build against Pocket. And you can buy Divine Barrier at some point, since it protects you against Pocket's barrage, and since it can absorb some of Abrams' strong damage. Because when it comes to Pocket's barrage, for example, it stacks with damage every time he hits you with it. His suitcase does a burst of damage when he pops out of it, and his teleport hits you if you are in the radius of the ball of teleportation. And or his ultimate, which is a tick of damage of poison, so if you activate that, then you'll have a little bit of damage negated off of the ult, which shouldn't last too long, I hope. The point of this example is to adjust your build to what you're going up against to make the games less miserable for you. This game is a little harsh because it's at alpha at the moment, but it will be harsh regardless because it's a half MOBA, half shooter. Okay, honestly, I spiraled into a whole other combo, but as a summary, build things that counter Abrams, like for example Hellbane, Toxic Bullets, Decay, Slowing Bullet, Suppressor, Cold Front, Slowing Hex, Withering Whip, Hunter's Aura, Point Blank, Lucky Shot, Silencer, Inhibitor, and Mystic Reverb. These are all things that both slow Abrams and make him weaker because of anti-heal, keeping him far and sluggish, make him very annoying to handle for Abrams players. Alright, now that we know how to go up against an Abrams and how to weaken him and make him less useful to his own team, now we can move on to other heroes that aren't Abrams. Now, Bebop. Bebop has conditions that really apply to everybody on some aspect, regardless of who you use. Like for example, playing behind cover so he doesn't hook you. His laser is good at denying and confirming souls and creeps, so play close and melee your creeps when you can. Make sure you know what he bought first. If he bought bomb, then minimize the amount of times he places or hits you with bombs. One neat trick that I realized is if you are on top of a minion, he has a chance of sticking the bomb on the minion instead of you, so just sit on one till he does place it, and if he does, then just run out of radius when, you know, he places it on the minion. And he doesn't get a stack on his bombs, which will give his bombs more damage, by the way, if he hits a player with it. If he gets hook first, however, make sure the minion wave starts on your side, because Bebop will stay close to tower and make the Guardian melee you, which will do half half your health, so that's a big problem. And his 4, you just have to play around corners because his ultimate, even though it has a radius at the very end of it, it won't hit you if you're behind a corner or just behind a wall or posts or whatever the fuck. And early, I recommend to not solo him because not only will you just give him stacks, and I also recommend to just not attack him if he ults you like really close and you have the advantage of hitting him, because it slows you and it heals him a good amount with spirit lifesteal. So just, you know, play it safe because most of the Bebobs will be building spirit and lifesteal. He's also a semi-tank, so just make sure you got at least your 1 and 2 to do tons of damage, and wait a bit till you get all of your early lane section because he does do a shit ton of damage, especially if he has a little bit of stacks in his bombs, which again gives him more damage if he hits a hero. Dynamo should be fairly easy. Don't get hit by a stun, play corners to not let him poke you out with his gun, and bait out his 2 when you buy restorative shot and melee lifesteal, then pressure him with 1 and 2. And also be very aware of your neighboring lane because Dynamos are better in duos, so he is someone who will most likely most of the time get a gank in your solo lane, especially if you've been pressuring him a lot. So yeah, Great Talon you shouldn't really struggle with, but in the hands of a demon, he will make you suffer. Do not underestimate Talon mains because their 1 and their 2 are extremely strong throughout the whole match. They will most likely play back under towers, so freeze the wave on your side of lane and less hit minions to bait him out. Be patient till he uses his 2 and ult him to do 1 good sweep kill and harass him from there to just bully him till lane phase is over. Now Hayes is gonna movement diff you, so make her miss her sleep and do not let her headshot stack you with her passive. I think it's a 5-second duration before it just disappears as an effect, and be aware that at 3k she will have ult. So does everyone else. She is a farming and split pushing demon and good at ganking and pressuring lanes, so if you don't see her for a hot minute, just let your teammates know. And keep in mind that she scales really hard still, so even if you bully her in lane, she can make a very fast recovery, but she is still very weak to you, so you can bully her a lot as long as she doesn't have sleep. And if she ults you, ram her to the nearest wall. If you're not close to one, just dash out as fast as you can or ult the second she does to counter that. Just be aware of her also buying unstoppable mid to late game, so keep an eye on what she builds, because if she has unstoppable, then you won't be able to stun her out of her ult and you'll just die. And Furnace, do not let him get the fire effect on you with his gun. He will be very annoying through the whole game since he is a good counter against you. He naturally will build both of his fire effect and toxic bullets with ricochet and spirit damage, depends on the person building it, but it still will involve lots of spirit damage that counters your sustain because of his tick damage. And combine that with toxic bullets, it will obviously do a shit ton of damage, and he can also build Hellbane with it, so he's pretty much a good direct counter towards you. Play very safe, try and kill him as fast as possible, as long as he doesn't out damage you or out heal you. Ivy got nerfed. She isn't that good against Abrams unless she is with her team. Just don't stand on her spikes unless it's like a small area, then you kind of have to run out of there. Her stun is subpar compared to yours, so just, you know, stun her back. If she ults, just ram her before she starts flying, and avoid her gun with corner. She isn't that good against Abrams, like I said. She is very bad now, in my opinion, especially against Abrams. Against other heroes, she can handle herself kinda, but that's just me, I guess. All right, now Kelvin. Do not fight Kelvin if he's in a duo. He will slow you down a lot and melt you with your beam or gun build, whichever he prefers to do. Gun build recently got nerfed, and so did the beam, but it was just slowing movement. By himself, he can heal with nades and hit you with them as well. He doesn't heal that much with his nades unless he scales his spirit. And if he's doing a beam build, then he's gonna match your healing rate pretty easily. So just avoid beam and nades as much as you can, regardless of what build he's using. And now, obviously, don't let him see you that often and surprise him with your 1 and 2 when he's next to a wall or structure, and you will be fine. Even when he uses his ultimate, he will only use it when he is low or early if he wants to all out you, which would only be a problem if you don't have your 1. So just be aware of what you got at the moment and when you might need it. Alright, now Geist. Geist, I think, shouldn't have gotten a buff. I don't know why people sleep on her. She was already good enough before the buffs, but I guess. Now for her, you have to try your best and avoid her bomb, even though it has like a horrible hitbox, because I'm out of the radius, but she still somehow hits me with it. She does lose health every time she uses it, so you avoiding it makes her weaker and weaker, so she, you know, compensates with her 2, which is a point and click lifesteal, so do not be in her range when she uses it. You will know because you will hear your heart beating and a little glass heart floating around you. Her third ability throws 3 blood shards that slow you and also takes health away from her, so just try and avoid those, which, funny enough, with a lot of these heroes, you just have to not let them see you as often. And her 4, you just have to be very respectful of her 4 in the beginning. That will probably be your weakness for the entirety of the lane, of early lane. I personally don't have much of a counter for that, so so try and kill her with an all-out attack using your ult and ram. Since your sustain isn't the best till mid-game, you can let her lower you so she just makes her ult completely useless during the fight, so she cucks herself. So if you are ballsy enough to do that, go for it, because you have a lot of sustain. If you start using your restorative shot, your melee, and your one at the same time, you will heal a lot. But mid to late game, her ult is pretty much worthless since you just heal everything back within an instant, especially with leech on. Lash the asshole. He will be in the air most of the time, so just surprise him when he's not in the air. And again, limit his vision of seeing you so he doesn't ult you into his tower, and make sure you ram him or light punch him while using your one, so you can stun him, so you can punch him, so you can lifesteal him so he doesn't damage you as much, because his gun also does a shit ton of damage pretty early. So any form of pressure back to him will help you out a lot. And he's also a really good ganker, so keep an eye in case he does rotate to let your team know, because that would be very bad if he got a free kill in other lanes and you didn't let your teammates know, which is big bad, big bad. All right, now McGinnis, my god, do I hate her early game, because she has become one of the most annoying laners. She has infinite poke, infinite ammo, infinite turns, and can solo your tower within 2 minutes into the goddamn match. She is invincible in dual lanes unless you're constantly harassing her, so kill turrets whenever you can, and wait to attack after she uses her wall. If she does take your tower early, steal the souls from the tower for your team and farm a lot from there. Now for Mirage, now this might be the first hero that can be hard to go against. He is one of the many that can negate your abilities because of his NATO, for example, which makes him invulnerable to almost anything, which is like Wraith ult, but you have it every couple seconds, because why not? Let's make it an ability that's an ult for someone else. Not only that, but we're gonna give him a 25% chance to not get hit by bullets. And not only that, when he goes into NATO form, he cannot get ulted by anything that would stun him, root him, anything like that. So he could just get away scot-free. Why not? Usually you'd want to fight him after he uses his NATO. He most of the time is a gun build, so he has NATO as his first ability. If he's using the stacks build, then you know he's gonna have his 3 first, which you don't want to let him poke you and constantly get these numbers on you to get, you know, spirit damage. You'd want to play slower and prio the minions till he uses his NATO, then that's when you can start getting a little bit more aggro towards him. His 2 heals him because he throws a scarab that heals him, so avoid getting hit by those. And the most annoying part was probably where he can TP anywhere, and that's his ultimate, as long as they are in vision in the map. So make sure you can keep an eye on him, because he is the CEO of ganking, and he is very annoying to face if he ganks you. So again, just make sure you keep an eye on him. If you know he's going to TP, let your teammates know, so on and so forth. All right, now Mo and Curl. I honestly like and hate this guy at the same time. He has a lot of meme potential, but I hate fighting against this guy, so I hate him. I call him fart and shit sometimes. But anywho, since you are a melee character, this guy can counter you completely unless you have ram, so he will hit you a lot with his one, and that heals him too, especially if you damaged him a lot. So make sure you have all of your early lane items to out heal this guy. His 2, he'll most likely use that to escape because he digs in the ground and he can negate a little bit of damage more. His 3 is useless since you melee most of the time, and his 4 legit has no counterplay unless someone else is with you and or can stun him from, you know, outside of you being ulted. And be ready and aware of his gank that this guy can get, since, you know, he is mostly a support. He can just press 4 and then magically out of nowhere some guy came from another lane. So that's really annoying to go up against. So now that we know his kit, you fight him by starting the fight with shooting and light meleeing. He usually starts with his 1 or 3, so once he uses both of them, you use your 1 for sustain since he already uses 1. You'd want to also do the melee mind games till he starts digging. Once he uses his dig, which will then stun him out of his animation, and by that time the gun effect will be gone. So from there you can just go all out on him, and by that time the gun effect will be gone and you can go all out on him till he panic ults, and then you can just finish him off. So there you go. Paradox is also someone who can counter you. She is a glass cannon that can be the worst to fight against in the right hand. So to start, keep your wave on your side of the lane to make sure that she can't fully set up her ult with tower, which again can do a shit ton of damage early, especially when they're 3k in. Try and bait out her 1 with places you don't need to cover, since she will try and flush you out of cover you need with it. Bait out her 2 with constant shooting since she is very squishy, and hide when she activates her 3 since that can be a little bit of a problem if she hits you with it. And her 4 has a range limit, so just keep your distance or just play around corners so she doesn't hit you. You don't really have to play distance, but you can if you really want to. If you do it right, then you can speedrun getting all your early game items. And make sure you harass her a lot before she gets her ult, just in case, because she can become very weak very early if you outplay her. But regardless though, she will be squishy throughout the entirety of the game. And now Pocket. My god, how much I fucking hate this guy. This guy can escape anything and does everything, but like it takes all your keys on your keyboard to perform one little action. Like this guy's build requires 5 conditions, all 5 actives being pressed at once, and the ability to click all 4 abilities at the same time. So if you are mechanically gifted, well, I have found your main for you, because this guy requires a shit ton of mechanical skill. But anywho, Pocket will make you suffer a little, since he can also negate your ram and make it out unscathed by TPing, Majestic Leaping, Warp Stoning, then TPing again while in Suitcase without using a single bar of stamina to get away from someone. Now, early game though, you just gotta not let him hit you with a barrage, since it stacks damage with each hit, which hurts a lot. His denies are slightly better than Abrams' gun, because he also has a shotgun, so you just gotta be faster. And you gotta know when to fight, since he will have a lot of damage early and can beat you in an early fight. If he's pushing you pretty hard by your 1 for lifesteal and get healing right to sustain more than you already do with your early lane, bait out his Suitcase before using ram, since he can also avoid it by using Suitcase. And you'd also want to predict when and how he will use his TP, or just wait till that's gone too. Then ram him and do all your plays to kind of kill him. And play slower once he has his ult out, since that's a good counter against you. He will, however, get outscaled late game though, so there isn't pretty much to worry about late game. Unless he does the thing where I said, he TPs, Majestic Leap, Warp Stoning, then TPing again while in Suitcase without using a single bar of stamina, then yeah, just don't bother fighting him if he's just going to constantly run, Now 7 is very weak unless he stuns you. Don't get hit by ball and turn lots of corners when he puts stun on you. Don't let him parry you, and that's it. Bro isn't really that good at all. I mean, unless he is in a dual lane, then maybe, but nah, he has a bit hitbox on his head. He is really easy to kill all game unless someone feeds him, but that's about it. Against Abrams, he's pretty bad. For Shiv, however, he is a little tanky, and he does bleed and recover off slashes and bleed, so don't let him knife you that often. Buy extra regen and healing right if you're struggling against him. Make sure you fight when you only have your 1 and 2, and avoid getting slashed. Go left and right. Don't go forward and back, since his slice is not maneuverable. Especially when he has rage, that second slash will kill you, or just hurt you a shit ton. And keep in mind that even though you're a tank, you can die to his execute even with those big numbers on your screen and your health bar. So do not get low at all when he gets his ult. His mobility is also most of the time limited to his slice too, so just make sure you take advantage of that. If he ever does overextend through the lane phase or mid to late game, you can single him out pretty easily even though he is pretty strong. Now Vindicta is probably also an annoyance to Abrams because she is long range and can stay in the sky for 90% of the time. You can't really do much other than get knocked down at some point and catch her lacking if she gets greedy and doesn't have flight and goes up in lane to get creeps or make pressure, so just wait for that perfect moment and do not fuck it up. Even though she does have an advantage on you when it comes to poking, try and get the minions on your end of the lane. Don't let her root you or get you low because of the root, since she has an execute ult, and her crow damage is not really that harmful, but try to avoid it regardless. And keep in mind that the crows ricochet off minions, so they can still hit you along with players. They can ricochet off players and hit other players, so just be mindful of that as well. Viscous is a maybe to me. He is good at pressure and can flush you out of cover with his punches and goo bombs, so make sure you are always moving with minimal usage of stamina just to kind of preserve it for more important instances, and be the one applying pressure with 1 and 2 after he uses his cube to heal, and try pushing his cube away from safety by punching it, especially if it's safe to do so. If it's not, then just don't do it. And shred his divine barrier as much as possible, since I have seen a lot of blobs use that more often. And don't fight him in ult form because you will lose. Just wait for him to get out of it. And if he just runs with it, then don't bother if he isn't that low, especially. Now Warden, he can be a little bit problematic, but it really depends, because if he's using slowing hacks, then you will have to use every stamina bar you have to get out of it. So try and save your stamina to avoid specifically his cage. His flask isn't that strong, and his 3 is defensive but not that good either, since it's on a cooldown and it doesn't really help him that much other than like giving him a little bit of armor. And careful with his ultimate early unless he is like low and you can finish him off before he gets it off, or if he's using it too late and he's still low regardless of him being any radius. And it won't be a problem for you later on in the game unless it's a group fight, so just be aware of his cage and do not let him poke you out either, since his gun is pretty strong. Now Wraith is also somewhat a glass cannon. She is weak early and can be a little bit tanky from mid to late game, and she's obviously really strong regardless, but she can be outplayed if using Abrams right. I'd say speedrun lane or keep it on your side to pressure her, and don't let her shoot you that often because she will get her cards faster than usual. Try and harass her early just so you don't have to deal with her ultimate at 3k, especially if you get it early, you can start harassing her even more. And when it comes to her ult, try and plan a route to take when she ults you, so you don't have to deal with her spamming her cards when you're just lifted up in the air. And that's one thing about her ultimate, she can control when to use it, but not where to use it, since you can literally outrun it with the right movement, especially if you're a very fast character. With Abrams, you will have superior stamina, so you have a lot of chances to escape from it and choose where to get ulted into. So against Wraith as well, you could just take a bunch of corners before she reaches you, and the ultimate will just be gone by then, since you know, she had to catch up to you to use her abilities and shoot you at the same time. And finally, Yamato. Yamato is actually really strong early game, so play it more safe. Usually she can also pressure you into tower, so if that's the case, play your side of lane or under tower, last hit minions, and deny as much as you can. Once you have 1 or 2 and all of early lane items, you can all out her, and hopefully that's before 3k, since she will have ult by then. She falls off really hard mid to late game, so yeah, you don't really got to worry about that. You don't really have to worry past early game, or lane phase for that matter. And now that we got all that, let me know if I missed anything or got anything wrong. This is all based off of my experience, but to finish off, let me get into some tech for Abrams and things related to tech that are useful for Abrams, which honestly there are only 2 that I want to talk about. First one being this dash crouch cancel. So this involves dashing, then clicking crouch and meleeing right after. This is good to last hit minions or to close gaps and instantly initiate a fight, usually in 1v1s or people who are running or a little far, so make sure you learn this because it can be useful. And the last one can be used to run or chase or jump into fights. So the way it works is if you double jump and hold melee while looking a little bit up and press 1, when you propel forward, then you will create momentum to push you further. So this is something that you got to learn as well at some point, and you can do this as long as you got some airtime between your feet and the ground, so go wild with this. In case it gets patched at some point especially, which I hope it doesn't, it seems nice tech to have, but anywho, I think I've finally covered everything that there is to learn about my experience with Abrams and how I use them. This is legit everything that I learn and keep at the top of my head on a daily basis, and everything I have learned after playing this game every day, because I've been no-lifing it, so hell yeah. Thank you for watching. Let me know if, again, I got something wrong or missed something. Just know if you're harsh about it, I will be just as harsh back. Bye-bye.